excellent team of researchers here at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki Law School. We run a research project on populist constitutionalism. This has been a kind of hot topic in the last few years, so we do not claim any originality. However, we do share a critical approach on this ongoing debate. Our starting point is that there is a great variety of different populisms, and that the study of their relation to constitutionalism is highly context specific. This workshop is the second major event that we organize. The first conference was held online in May 2021, and it was entitled The Populist Transformation of Constitutional Law. This present workshop, our second event, rests on the idea that there are varying historical experiences with populism in different contexts, which give a rather mixed record of their implications of constitutionalism. Now, this is a two-day workshop divided in 4 panels, which are led by an introductory speech by our friend and colleague Kostas Vlachos. This introductory speech and the first panel will take place today, and the other 3 panels tomorrow. We hope that we have brought together scholars from different disciplines to present what we believe to be excellent and innovative research ideas. All the presenters of both days appear as panelists on this Zoom webinar, and the rest may attend as attendees. Apart from that, anybody else may watch the workshop in our website, popcon.gr, where it is now live streamed. Both panelists and attendees, just one for the time being, may pose questions or comments either in written using the chat or the Q&A operations of the Zoom webinar, or orally, but only after requesting the right to speak. Now, the head of the Public Law and Political Science section of our school, Professor Panagiotis Mantzoufas, was to greet our workshop, but unfortunately, due to weather conditions and a forced reschedule, he is right now traveling on boat, and he is unable to connect, but he sent us his greeting, and I am going to read his greeting right now before we begin. Well, greeting by Professor Panagiotis Mantzoufas. In recent decades, populism has changed the political landscape on a global scale. The study of this political phenomenon has produced populism studies as a distinct field within social and political sciences. For some time now, constitutional scholars have been asking themselves how populism affects constitutionalism and how it may transform constitutional law as we know it. Under the scientific direction of Professors Ifigeneia Kamtsidou and Akritas Kaidatzis, our school has launched the PopCon research project, which comprises a team of young researchers dedicated to the study of populism's implications on constitutionalism. One of the project's aims is to bring together scholars from different disciplines and backgrounds in order to create an international scientific network. The first international conference of the PopCon project had remarkable success. Its subject was the populist transformation of constitutional law. An edited volume of the papers presented will be published soon. In the meantime, the PopCon research team came up with another idea. Populism has re-emerged recently, but it is not a novel phenomenon. It has a rich and quite diverse history. The subject of the present workshop is to explore how populism has interacted with constitutionalism in the past. Several scholars from around the world have been gathered together to present their research on the topic. On behalf of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki Law School and of the section of Public Law and Political Science, I welcome you all to what promises to be a very interesting and thought-provoking 2 days seminar. And here the greeting ends. As I said earlier, we will begin right in a minute with Kostas Vlachos' introductory speech, and then we will have the first panel of the workshop and the only panel for today, which consists of 3 presentations. And tomorrow we will have 3 more panels. Beginning from 12 o'clock Eastern European time. We thought that it is best if we listen to the 3 presentations of each panel first, and then pose questions or comments on any or all of the panelists. I will begin by giving the floor to each panelist to present hers or his paper, and then after all 3 are done, we will have enough time for discussion. Well, I don't know whether there are any questions before we start. If not, then we could begin some 5 or 6 minutes ahead of the time with the introductory speech of our workshop. And this will be given by our own Kostas Vlachos. Kostas is a legal historian, assistant professor at our law school, and he's an expert in Roman law. The title of his speech is "Come with me and seize the Republic, Gaius Marius's call for a radical state reform, 107 before Christ." This, of course, comes from an age that certainly predates modern constitutionalism. However, the Roman Respublica has served as a major source of inspiration for constitutional thinkers of modernity. And moreover, as we will see in a minute, Marius's reform proposals exhibit an astonishing resemblance with contemporary populist discourses. Costa, we're very glad to have you with us, and we're looking forward for your talk.
Thank you very much, Akritas. Thank you. Really, I'm really very happy to be with you. I feel honestly very honored for this invitation. I was really very glad when, for the first time, I heard of your initiative your project, PopCon, with such an attractive name, also modern abbreviation. It is quite a challenge for me to participate to this workshop. As dear Akritas already mentioned, my reality, my historical reality is quite a few centuries away from the earliest historical reality of the rest of the panels. So, oh my God, what a stress. Anyway, I really hope we'll see the bridges, the conceptual bridges between these so long distance moments in history. This paper has been inspired from longest, widest research I ran a few years ago on the concept of patria and patriotism and its use as an ideological tool for an individual appropriation of politics. And this happened in Rome during the last decades of the Res Publica Constitution, before the fall of the Roman Respublica. So thank you very, very much again, dear Ifigeneia, dear Akritas, dear Eleni Kalambakou, and good luck for the rest of the PopCon's workings. Let me just activate my share screen now. I have a little PowerPoint presentation for you. Please allow me to put it in a full screen display. Okay. Can you see my slide in a full screen display? Okay, thank you. So, around 150 BC, the mid-2nd century BC, the Greek historian Polybius described the Roman Respublica as the perfect combination of the three types of government, that is aristocracy, democracy, and monarchy. Let's read his words. And there was such an equal and appropriate part of all three types, both in the Roman constitution and the administration, that it was impossible even for a native to say with certainty whether the whole system was aristocratic, democratic, or monarchical. The detailed description that follows this introduction constitutes the most accurate picture of the constitution of Respublica in theory. The long-lasting political conflicts between patricians and plebeians had modeled a mixed constitution and had driven the threefold political organs of Rome, the Senate, the popular assemblies, and the consuls, or the public officials in general, in a harmonic system of functional interdependence that served the common interest in an optimal degree. According to Polybius, Rome owed its domination over so many countries and nations, not so much to its armies and its military commanders, but to the quality of its political system. So much for theory, though. Despite its technical accuracy, Polybius's commentary doesn't say a word on the preeminent role of the nobilitas. This was an extremely narrow social circle of Roman families whose members had exercised the consulship and who had an absolute monopoly in this public office, by far the most crucial one in the Roman civil and military administration. Composed both by patricians and highly ranked plebeians, the nobilitas monopolized the candidacies to the public offices, dominated the Senate, and manipulated the public opinion in the popular assemblies. This political reality was part of a larger picture of social and economic crisis that hit Rome at the same time as Polybius wrote his thoughts on the Constitution. Rome's long imperialistic wars had brought into the empire many lands, money, and the change of the economic model. However, this change had a great victim, the middle class of Roman Italy. Here's just a selective account of the crisis factors: the population due to the war casualties, desertification of small land properties due to the farmers' long absence to military service, appropriation of the conquered lands by the Roman aristocracy, verticalization of the productive economy through the massive use of servile manpower that flows in Rome, and a severe political corruption based on the abuse of the tax collecting procedure and the practice of vote selling. Facing the popular discontentment due to this situation that caused frequent rise-ups, a part of the nobilitas changes its vision and adopts a people-friendly ideology. By the first decades of the 1st century BC, two distinct and opposite trends are met within the narrow circle of the nobilitas: the conservative optimates and the progressivist populares. The first remain obstinately stuck at the traditional elitist oligarchical ideology and accuse the second for a disastrous populism that puts the state at high risk. The last century of the Respublika's life will be marked by the political conflicts between these two ideologies that will turn Rome into a battlefield of civil hostilities. The first episode of extreme political violence takes place in 133 BC. The plebeian tribune Tiberius Gracchus is assassinated in front of the Roman assembly by the followers of Scipio Nasica, a leading figure of the optimates. Scipio had asked his supporters to assist the state and kill the tyrant. Tiberius was, of course, not a true tyrant. In fact, his family was belonged to was one of the most distinguished ones of the nobilitas. The true reason for this assassination was Tiberius's agrarian reform that had been voted earlier in the same year. His bill was establishing a maximum limit of individual land property and the redistribution of lands that exceeded this limit. These lands had been illegally occupied by members of Rome's high aristocracy. Tiberius's law aimed to bring back to life the archetypic figure of Roman citizen, a small landowner in times of peace and a brave soldier in times of war. This man was the traditional cell of the Roman body politic, the Populus Romanus. Moreover, the ratio legis of Tiberius's agrarian law was related to a customary constitutional rule older than the Respublika itself. In case of war, only the adsidui, that is, Roman citizens who possessed a minimum surface of land, had the right to enroll to the Roman army. This principle was founded on the general acceptance of the idea that property and money were regarded as a pledge of loyalty to the state. Thus, there was in the adsidui a kind of guarantee and an assurance of patriotism. In other words, one's land property and fatherland, his patria, were linked in a scale relation that ended up in rendering the private individual a good citizen and a patriot. The optimates had seen in Tiberius's law an unprecedented violation of the Republican Constitution, a violation incited by a populist, a true traitor who was trying to manipulate the common people in order to overthrow the legitimate Roman government. While these dramatic things are happening at Rome, in another place of the empire, far away at the battlefield of Spain, a young Roman citizen was being distinguished for his bravery. Gaius Marius was the son of an equestrian rank family from an Italian city called Arpinum, which was bound to the nobis, the aristocrat Caius Metellus, with ties of political clientele. Marius was not a nobis, however, he was extremely ambitious. Marius's way up to the public administration will be difficult, often obstructed by opposing nobles. He will nevertheless take advantage both of his political patron's assistance and his military talent to climb up the administrative hierarchy and reach the office of consul. The key factor to this achievement was his appointment as Caius Metellus' military assistant at the war against Jugurtha in 109 BC. Marius became soon his soldiers' favorite superior and camarade, brave and simple as he was. 2 years later, in 107 BC, encouraged by his soldier and assisted by the Italian populace, he will be elected by the citizens' assembly as a consul, and he will be appointed also by the Senate as a chief of the continuing operations against Jugurtha in Africa. Marius's first act after his election and his military command's prolongation will be to recruit a supplementary army for the continuation of the operations against Jugurtha. He will do that by breaking off with the traditional principle of recruiting only among the Kamtsidou. But his long speech to the crowd that had elected him as consul was much more than a simple call for enrollment. It was a programmatic declaration of rupture with the political status quo of the nobilitas and the call for a radical transformation of the Respublica itself. Let's read some lines from his speech. Compare me now, fellow citizens, a new man, with those arrogant nobles. What they know from hearsay and reading, I have either seen with my own eyes or done with my own hands. What they have learned from books, I have learned by service in the field. Think now for yourself whether words or deeds are worth more. They scorn my humble birth. I scorn their worthlessness. I am mocked for my lot in life, they for their infamy. For my part, I believe that all men have one and the same nature, but that the bravest is the best war. And if the fathers of Albinus and Bestia, these were nobles that have been exercised the military command in Africa before Metellus and Marius. They were members of the nobility. So, and if the fathers of Albinus and Bestia could now be asked whether they would prefer to have me or those men for their descendants, what do you suppose that they would reply? If not, that they desire to have the best possible children. But if they rightly look down on me, the current optimatus, let them also look down on their own forefathers, whose nobility began, as did my own, in manly deeds. The whole rhetoric of the text is based on the antithesis between they nobiles and an I novus homo. between a long line of aristocratic descendants and a humble novity. This contrast has long functioned in favor of the aristocrats. Now Marius shows his audience that it can also work for them. The nobitas's contemptuous look over citizens of humble birth can now be returned to them. Their arrogance is nothing more than pure hypocrisy, conceding their total lack of merit. Against this scornful look, Marius opposes the true virtues of a Roman, his deeds, his bravery, his honesty. The line of noble descendants is then redefined. If the old noble citizens, whose nobility was the only one truly honorable, if these men could be asked to choose their sons between today's nobles and Marius, they would certainly choose the latter. Let's go back to the main text. Hence, an alternative type of noble descendants comes out of Marius's words. Next to the black descendants, used by the nobles as an argument for social and political exclusion of the humble, Marius suggests a moral descendants, one founded on the common values and virtues of the ancestors. Marius's formula is a genius shortcut to access the nobilitas. To the nobilitas of sons, from which he is excluded, Marius opposes the nobilitas of virtue, thanks to which he too becomes a genuine heir of noble ancestors. The political legitimacy of his election has now been founded. He is a consul on an equal foot with his predecessors. Now, what is valid for the consul is also valid for those who elected him. Their humility will no longer be an obstacle to their social and political inclusion. Those who want to join their forces with their consul in a common effort to serve their country are now welcome. After a long speech against the optimates, Marius finally sends out his call for enrollment for the war in Africa. Let's read again the lines. I shall add a few words on the state of public affairs. Such of you then as are of military age, come with me and seize the Respublica, and let no discouragement from the ill fortune of others or the arrogance of the late commanders affect anyone. I myself shall be with you, both on the march and in the battle, both to direct your movements and to share your dangers. I shall treat you and myself on every occasion alike, and doubtless, with the aid of God, all good things, victory, spoil, and glory are ready to our hands. I would add more, my fellow citizens, if words could give courage to the faint-hearted. To the brave, I think that I have said enough. Marius's call for enrollment breaks with the very old principle of land possession that we saw earlier. From now on, the only conditions to enroll would be military age and carriage. Poverty would no longer be a reason for exclusion, not only from military service, but also from political life. Marius's words on that point are very significant. His call refers to the grabbing of the res publica, a very rich term which expresses the idea of public life in all its aspects. The expression, come with me and seize the Respublica, is an invitation to all those who share the same aversion with Marius against the optimates and their appropriation of the political system of Rome. The recruitment of the humble goes much further than the needs of the war. These men will form a new body politic which will restitute the Respublica. Was it pure rhetoric? The answer is no. the democratic system of classification of the Roman citizens according to their possessions, money, etc., and their respective political rights is being bypassed by Marius's decision. The long-lived idea that only landowners can be good patriots and trustworthy citizens is going to be abandoned. However, this new patriotism is not purely altruistic. The new consul reminds his new followers of the money and other economic profits that await them from the war. The appeal of Marius's call among the commons was so great that the number of volunteers exceeded by far the size of troops that the Senate had authorized in Rome. The Roman historian Sallust offers a very telling explanation about this success. Let's read his lines. He himself, that is Marius, in the meantime, proceeded to enlist soldiers not after the ancient method or from the classes, but taking all that were willing to join them, and the greater part from the lowest ranks. Some said that this was done from a scarcity of better men, meaning landowners, and others from the consul's desire to pay court to the poorer class, because it was by that order of men that he had been honored and promoted. And indeed, to a man grasping at power, the most needy are the most serviceable. Persons to whom their property, as they have none, is not an object of care, and to whom everything appears honorable against a price. Was Sallust right? Were Marius's motives not patriotic? His acts are very revealing. As soon as he arrived in Africa, he marched with his new army into a part of the country which was fertile and abundant in spoil, where whatever he captured, he gave it to his soldiers. After the victorious ending of the war, Marius will return home in triumph. A couple of years later, he will be re-elected consul for 5 times in a row, from 104 down to 100 BC. This was another severe blow against the very old constitutional rule, that is the interdiction of someone's continuous re-election to a public office. But Marius was already too popular among the people and very necessary to the Senate in front of a new military threat, the Germanic tribes of the Cimbri and the Teutons. Just 1 year after his re-election, Marius's close political friend, the plebeian tribune Apuleius Saturninus, will have a law voted which provided the foundation of Roman colonies in northern Africa. The beneficiaries of this land distribution were no others than Marius's soldiers, the ones having fought on his side against Jugurtha. Then, 1 year later, in 102 BC, Marius will help Saturninus exterminate his political enemies and get re-elected as well. In return, Saturninus will claim the allotment of the plain of the river Po in northern Italy and of some regions in Macedonia, always in order to distribute land to Marius's veterans. The Novus Homo of 107 BC was right to turn to the, I'm citing Sallust, the artisans and rustics, whose whole subsistence and credit depended on their labor. And one might eventually believe that he really meant to put Rome on the path of a radical political change. However, what followed his famous speech does not really fit this plan. Between the agrarian law of Tiberius Gracchus back in 133 and the laws voted through the incitement of Apuleius Saturninus, there's a striking difference. Tiberius's goal was the demographical rebooting of the Roman people through the redistribution of land. The scope of this law was genuinely public, general, and abstract. On the contrary, Saturninus's laws benefited only to a specific circle of persons, Marius's supporters, to whom these laws provided a gift, a paying, in return for their services and for their political support. Tiberius's healing of the Respublica aimed the re-establishment of the lost balance between the different partners of the Roman constitution. On the contrary, starting with Marius, the Respublica will enter a period of continuous privatization, of a constant slip towards the field of private law transactions and individual appropriation of public life. Without having ever been explicitly abolished, the Republican Constitution will slowly lose its public nature before ceding its way to the imperial regime. Despite the slow political decay of the nobilitas, the Respublica will never return into a state of balance. It will die slowly under the consecutive abuses of the constitutional rules by different leading political figures and their adversaries, such as Marius, Sylla, Pompey, Julius Caesar, and finally August. All these men and many others were supposed to fight their political enemies re publicae constituendae causa, I'm explaining the Latin right way, in order to re-establish the Respublica, to let the Respublica return to its good function. What they will finally have managed to constitute, though, will not be a Respublica, but a res privata, a political system based on the rule of one man. In other words, the imperial regime. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Costa. I have to say that I enjoyed your speech very, very much, and I found it tremendously interesting. I'm also very curious to see what reactions you will have. And so we have some time for questions and comments or interventions. As I said earlier, panelists may use the chat button to write a comment or question. Attendees may use the Q&A button, and if anybody wishes to take to orally pose a question or make a comment, they can request us, and we will allow them to speak. I've seen earlier a hand raised, but I cannot see it now.
It was me clapping.
Okay, clapping. All right, yes.
But if I can have the word, I have some comments.
Sure.
I may. Thank you, Kostas, very much. It was very informative and very fascinating, because you talked about two populists, I think, in the Roman era, different populists, and although centuries ago it sounded very modern to me, compared especially to the Greek modern history, and I have noted some similarities, like that the control of the political system was in certain families. This is very similar to the Greek political system today, that there were two teams, the optimates and the populares, I think. The last years, the political conflict in Greece is between the optimals and the populists. So it's very similar, I think. And it struck me what you said, that property and money was a guarantee for patriotism. We see these last years, we see that whoever has money can buy a residence permit in Greece and can even buy a citizenship. We saw that in Cyprus very strikingly. And the other thing that that Marius was a populist who grabbed power and then became an autocrat, we would say in modern terms. And the final comment that the way you ended, that the appropriation of public life as a property. We see now autocrats that they think that the state is their property, and so it was it sounded very modern to me, all the speech. Thank you very much, very much.
Thank you for all these so interesting remarks, and for this backup for to my speech. If I may just say just a couple of words on these remarks. What is also there to see as very, we legal historians avoid the word similar, but it is nevertheless, we cannot help but compare this historical moment with the modern times anyway. But what is there also very close to similarity is the economic crisis that preceded the Respublica's decay and fall, and final fall. And secondly, well, I would like to say much more, but anyway, I'm limiting myself. Secondly, concerning this appropriation of the Respublica, it is not only through the appropriation of land property, which is on the material level. But surprisingly, very interestingly, there is a very direct line that starts from the appropriation of land, which is wealth, money, materialism, and ends up in the appropriation of institutions, constitutional institutions. And once we are not playing by the rules, by the constitutional rules, we are already starting to appropriate the Respublica. There's no alternative. Either you respect the Constitution or you appropriate. So thank you very much again for these remarks.
Yes, Ifigeneia.
Thank you so much, Costa. I agree with Eleni that your speech presented situations very close to what we live today and what we have lived in Greece since the establishment of the Greek state. The importance of families in the political life was a stable phenomenon. And I think Europeans recognize this as a characteristic of our republic. My question, I have a question. My question is the following one. Can we say that we have two ideas, two conceptions of the constitution of the people? The one that is the popular idea on the constitution of people, established on criteria, constitutional criteria, and the other one conceiving the people as something in a continual change. Everybody can enter to the people, and these people is the only one who can exercise the power. Thank you.
Excuse me, dear Ifigeneia, I didn't really follow the first one of your the first part of your question, the first version of constitutions, in the first conception.
That through your speech, through your intervention, we can understand that at the time in Rome, we had two different ideas on what the people is, how the people is constituted. The first one conceives the people as a body that is formed following some criteria. And this idea intends to adopt large criteria, so to integrate in the people larger
parts of the population.
Parts of the population. And the other one, the Marius's conception of the people, is the following: in the people can enter everybody. Everybody that supports Marius's ideas. And so we have a fluid people. And this fluid people, because he is fluid, gives the power to Marius, to the leader.
Thank you really very much for this question, because it gives me the opportunity to clear up some things. From the legal point of view, all these people, both the assiduity and the audience, or the supporters or the followers of Marius, legally talking, they are all particles, members of the Roman people, legally talking, since they all have the Roman citizenship. Nevertheless, in Rome, from the very old times, from the royal Etruscan times, there was what I mentioned in a point of my paper, that this democratic classification of the people, of the citizens. The citizens were classified according to their financial potential, either land possession or money, in classes. And this classification was serving the function of one of the three Roman popular assemblies, the voting units, etc. Now I'm trying to avoid to turn your webinar in a seminar of Roman constitutional law, but I have to mention a few words just to make you understand. So there were these 5 classes of citizens, where all the citizens, all the people that we met today in my speech were included. But the proletarians and the capitescensi, those who followed Marius, those who did not have enough money, who were not landowners and who could not enroll before, these citizens were inside the lowest class. And this class had was the most crowded one. I'm going to give you just a last technical detail, because this is what's going to make you understand. Inside each class of these 5 classes was further divided in centuriae, units of 100 men. But only the very, very first class, and within this class, only a minority of centuriae were really groups of only 100 citizens. As you go down the classes, inside each centuria, the number of citizens of each centuria becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. But the centuria are the vote units. Romans vote by centuria and not individually, which means that as you go from upwards downwards, the voting unit has a much larger, more massive, how can I say, stock of individual wills of citizens, of individuals inside. So the first 18 units of the first class, who were the cream of the cream, etc., I'm not saying any other words, really well represented individually when voting by centuria. There were units of 100 citizens. When you arrive down at the 5th class, the centuria of the 5th class, within one single centuria, you have thousands of individuals. And the last detail, the system of voting, the mechanism of voting provided that the voting would start from the first class and would go downwards. But the voting would also end up once the majority of votes would be achieved. Well, the first class by itself, I think I have a memory gap now. Either only the first, I think it was only the first, or at least the first with the second had the majority. So it never happened to the proletarians to vote. They will have to wait for a bill brought by Tiberius Gracchus, which provided that inside this popular assembly, each time there was a session, the voting would start from different classes. I don't know the English words for that. Mixed up order, whatever. So that after 400 years after the establishment of the Respublica, which goes back to 509 BC, it could happen to the proletarians and the capitescensi to be the first to vote. But then again, one single vote belonged to thousands of citizens. So, in order for me to return to your initial question, both the nobitases talking about the citizens, both the nobitases' favorite citizens and Marius' favorite citizens were citizens. They were belonging, legally talking, to the Populus Romanus and had the right to participate to the popular assemblies. But from the political point of view, or talking about the constitutional reality, the lowest ranks would never actively participate to the political life. This is why the, how can I say, the populares, who were really called like that in a depreciative way by the Optimates, this is why they will turn to these men, to this part of the Roman people, but it was part of the Roman people. They had the Roman citizenship. So it is, I think that there were, if there's ground to see two different visions, these two different visions are two different visions of the res publica itself in terms of political inclusion. In the mind of the nobilitas, they have always been the leading political class in Rome, even before they became mixed, patricians and plebeians. In the first 3 centuries, there were only patricians inside, but there was always an aristocracy which would lead the way of the constitution. For them, there was place for the people. There was some space for the people, as long as the people didn't claim bad things for them. Okay, and as long as they did not claim the control of the Republic. Once, after their own abuse of the empire and its achievements, conquered lands, etc., etc., once there will be a reaction from their own body with the populares, they will really rise up against what they were conceiving traitors. Okay, there will be, these populares will be a part of the nobilitas who will finally start seeing that there was no, it was a dead end. This monopole was a dead end. They would not survive themselves unless they proceeded to a widening of the basis, popular basis inclusion. Okay, but I have to stop here because I'm starting to abuse your time. So there are two different conceptions of the Respublica itself and two different conceptions of patriotism, of Rome as a political patria. Okay, father. There are so many things to say on that. So.
Thank you very much, Costa. I wouldn't be too quick to find similarities with present or contemporary political systems. However, it is astonishing how close, how similar the rhetoric of Marius is with contemporary political populist discourses. The anti-elitism, the us versus them, or the few, the many versus the few rhetoric, and of course something very important, the issue of the land redistribution. All this and this very interesting discussion we had makes me think that we should perhaps think together, Costa, of an opportunity to organize a seminar or a workshop on the Roman legal history and constitutional history from the perspective of what we have now in our times learned from the populist studies. Again, I thank you very, very much, and all the participants in this discussion.